Meteorologist Matt Devitt, who's been live there all morning long.
Yeah, guys, so basically, let me kind of paint the situation we have right now. I am actually not even near the inner core of Dorian. What I'm being impacted by, it's some of the outer bands, and that is where the rain is picking up. And, you know, you got to think of the rain. It's a downdraft. It is bringing in some of the stronger winds high up with Dorian, bringing it right down to the ground, and also bringing in some of this. Very slowly, very gradually, I've seen an increase in the waves, but believe it or not, this is low tide. The high tide is going to be at around noon and 1. But if we could, let's try to go back to Doppler radar. And the good news, at least here for Daytona Beach, which so far they've been taking it like a champ. We've had some tropical storm force gusts, but the hurricane force gusts have been closer to the eye wall. That's what I want to avoid, and it looks like I will. That's where the wind gusts could be in excess of 80, 90, even 100 miles an hour. I'm going to avoid that, and that certainly helps us out around Daytona Beach. Now, what have I seen? What type of damage? Really not much. We've had over about 2,000 people without power. I've had some tree limbs scattered across the area. No structural damage in which I've observed so far. Can't rule it out, but so far the wind gusts about 40, 60 miles an hour. Can't rule out a little bit higher, especially if we get hit with some of these outer bands, which are certainly kicking up the Atlantic. Look at that. If you've ever been to Daytona Beach, I'm sure it didn't look like this. Very angry, crashing waves. I'm obviously watching the progress of the pier. So far, so good. What about surge? There is that potential. Brittany and Brooke have been highlighting that forecast and how we have seen 1 to 2 feet around the Halifax River at its worst point so far. But the potential, not only for us, but up the coast, could hit, potentially, not set in stone, 3 to 5 feet. And as we go into time, those surge levels could be very similar up towards Georgia and the Carolinas, which by that point, they're dealing with a different type of storm. 2 days ago, we had a compact Category 5. Now, the max winds are going to slowly lower, but the wind field grows as the rest of the southeast coast has to deal with Dorian in the days ahead. But in the meantime, dealing with some of these outer bands, meteorologist Matt Devitt, Wink News here in Daytona Beach.
Thanks, Matt. Here's the latest track.
Let's get back out to Weather Authority meteorologist Matt Devitt. Matt, you've been out there all morning long. How have conditions changed from then to now?
So we have been in and out of some squalls, and every now and then you see the camera going left and right. We're kind of adjusting with the wind. But this system is still 80, 90, 100 miles offshore. And let me kind of highlight what's going on right now, at least at my location. If we could, let's pop up Doppler radar. And at least some good news for Daytona Beach and up the coast, we will be avoiding the worst part of the storm, which is going to be near the eye, as well as the eye wall. Now, what you also notice is that rain shield is starting to come in from the Atlantic, and that's when I really start to expect our winds to increase, and that could go up 5, 10, even 20 miles per hour. But I also was tracking Hurricane Matthew a few years ago, got hit by that one along the East Coast, and so far, Dorian has not stacked up to that extent. So it's been kind of lower, and that's why I haven't had any significant damage here in Daytona Beach. We've had some wind gusts, 45 to 55 mile per hour, so tropical storm force gusts. As far as storm surge goes, about 1 to 2 feet, and that would be around the Halifax River. That's about a few miles inland and to the left here. And you could probably see that on Doppler radar also. So we've had a little bit of surge, but nothing insane. Everybody has taken this storm fairly well. We do have some spotty power outages, but it's not widespread. But where we go with this system from here on out is that actually after tonight, goodbye to Dorian across the state of Florida, which I mentioned 2 days ago. I had promised you guys that it was going to take the turn, and it did. And it actually turned so much so to the east that, as you can see here in Daytona Beach, you know, we're seeing some rain, we're seeing some wind. But if this system went even more to the west, we would have had more of a huge and significant influence. But we're still going to watch it. I am still going to have these bands of rain and wind all the way towards lunchtime before we hit Wednesday evening. It starts to peel out, and then after that point, Georgia and the Carolinas have to watch out for Hurricane Dorian. But here's what I have right now. Daytona Beach, I'll continue to keep you in the loop. Meteorologist Matt Devitt, live in Daytona Beach. Guys, back to you.
Coverage for you this morning, starting with meteorologist Matt Devitt, who has been on Daytona Beach all morning long. Matt, how are the weather conditions out there right now?
So we have basically been in and out of some squalls, and when we see that heavier rain, that helps to bring in some strong winds above down to the ground. But honestly, to compare it to something, it's like getting hit with a low to moderate end tropical storm. The hurricane force winds have not been felt here, and in fact, we have several miles of breathing room offshore. Now, with that said, Eric, if we could pan out, the Atlantic, no question, is angry. Look at those waves, and they have actually closed down the pier for very good reason, just in case one of those powerful waves goes higher than normal and potentially tries to hurt the structural integrity of the pier. So far, so good. And that has been the case really across Daytona Beach. Nothing that this area can't handle. We have had some spotty power outages, but nothing widespread. As of the latest check, it was over 2,000. We've had some tree limbs that have been scattered across some of the roadways, which, by the way, very, very well monitored from the Daytona police. Everybody has been hunkering down just in case. We have had a little bit of a surge, 1 to 2 feet overnight. Not here. That was at the Halifax River. That's a few miles to my west. But I'm also at low tide. Now, as we hit lunchtime at about noon and 1, I'm going to be curious to see just how high our levels get here at my location, right near the Daytona Pier and also along the Atlantic. And that would be because we would have the wind helping to bring up some of our levels. The projections that you've heard from Brittany as well as Brooke, there's also the potential for 3 to 5. It's not entirely ruled out, but at least so far it's been on the lower end of the spectrum at 1 to 2. So where do we go from here? Well, truthfully, Daytona Beach has dodged a bullet. It could have been a lot worse. Essentially, like I said earlier, they're getting hit with a low to moderate end tropical storm. Now, for our friends up the coast, for Georgia and the Carolinas, they actually could see more than what I'm experiencing right here, and that's why they need to watch the progress of the storm as it evolves into a different storm. 2 days ago, slammed the northern Bahamas. Cat 5, compact. Well, now it's starting to unravel as the wind field is growing as well. But I'll continue to watch the conditions here in Daytona Beach, which just got hit with a pretty good wave, and these tide levels will continue to come up as we approach lunchtime. But for the very latest on what you can expect back in Southwest Florida, I want to toss it back.
Conditions. Matt.
Okay, so about 80, 90, 100 miles offshore, and in the Atlantic we have a powerful storm, a storm that it's changing. It's expanding its wind field. We've been talking about that all morning, and actually when I first got here to Daytona Beach, when the sun wasn't up, we actually had numerous power flashes. The good news is that it's not widespread. We just haven't had strong enough wind here to produce widespread power outages. Now, with that said, we've actually had some occasional gusts, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. But I want to share with you a very interesting observation over the past half hour. So get this. About a half hour ago, my wind was coming this way. So basically from north to south. Guess what has just changed? Now it's coming in from west to east. What has happened is the eye is no longer parallel with my area. It is now moving away from me and to my northeast. How about that? Literally the clouds that are racing in the sky, they were going this way a half hour ago. Now they're going this way, and that tells me, along with Doppler radar, which I want to peel up right now, the eye is starting to move more and more up the coast. So let me kind of break down what we have on radar. So we obviously have the core, we have the eye, and the eye wall. That's going to be the strongest part of the storm, where we could see those hurricane force gusts 80, 90, 100 miles per hour plus. I am not going to see that. However, I am going to see some of the extreme outer bands and the western periphery of that windshield and that rain shield. And that's where the wind gusts could hit 50 to 60, even can't roll out 65 miles an hour. But so far, Daytona has done a fantastic job taking this storm. We've had the police monitoring, prepping the area. We have had a few minor things here and there, a few lamps, posts that have been broken. We have some tree limbs scattered across the area. The surge has been manageable. Only 1 to 2 found around the Halifax River. The one thing, though, to watch as we go into time, and I've already been noticing, if we can pan out into the Atlantic, is that the tide has slowly been coming in, and our high tide, which we're going to have to monitor, is going to be at around noon. But here's a look at some of the current conditions in Daytona Beach. I want to toss it back to you in the Wink Weather Center.
Hurricane warnings are still active along much of Florida's east coast. The wind is really whipping along Daytona Beach. This is a live look at Daytona Beach, and you can see those conditions.
Yeah.
Pretty nasty out there.
The waves are getting
Yeah.
bigger and bigger. Let's go back out to Weather Authority meteorologist Matt Devitt live there with a look at those conditions. Matt.
All right, so you guys were watching a few minutes ago. We had the tide levels come up, literally the highest that I had seen so far this morning. So I said, hey, let's play it safe. Let's go a little bit higher. So here's where I was. And if you look very closely, see that piece of wood, and I guess you could say a log right there? That is the previous level of the previous high tide. And I was about 30 feet out from there. And I do expect probably very similar conditions as we hit noon and 1 p.m. But also, speaking of conditions, let me kind of swing you around. I'll show you what we have right now. As far as debris goes, most of it has been from some of the stronger wind gusts, a lot of pieces of palm trees, some litter here and there. And then as we swing around more to the right, notice how they boarded up, because a few days ago, there was the potential for a land-falling major hurricane. Well, that is not the case anymore. You know, a very interesting sound has actually been from that amusement ride, a howl, like a hurricane howl. We heard that as soon as we got in, which also is when we started to see some power flashes. Thankfully, the power outages, not widespread, about $2,000 in Volusia County. But look down that road. You know, outside of about one or two cars, it's a ghost town. Everybody's taking this seriously, not messing with it. Just stay inside, you stay dry. We've had some wind gusts, 50 to 55 miles an hour, but this is essentially like Daytona Beach taking a tropical storm. Like Brittany, Brooke, myself have been telling you all morning, the worst part of the storm stayed offshore. We dodged a bullet. That's where the hurricane force wind gusts were, 80, 90, 100 mile per hour plus. So we certainly benefited from the fact that this system remained out to the east. But what do the rest of the southeast have in store for them as this system rolls out of Florida? Well, for Georgia or the Carolinas, they still got to watch the progress and monitor it. They have the potential for several feet of storm surge. I had a little bit this morning, but thankfully, so far, everything has been pretty manageable. Near the Halifax River, about a few miles to my west, they had a little bit at high tide. That was just after midnight, about 1 to 2 feet. A few local streets were inundated. But so far, so good. But the true test is going to be here in about 2 to 3 hours when we hit high tide. And that's when I'm going to be monitoring the progress and to see just how high we get. But in a nutshell, you know, Daytona Beach is taking this like a champ. The eye has already pushed northeast of me, and it will continue to roll out. And after dealing, guys, with Dorian for as long as we have, after tonight, it will finally start to exit our state. But reporting live right now, Daytona Beach, meteorologist Matt Devitt, Wink News, the Weather Authority.